Okay, folks, I think I'll get started. There are a couple of people coming and going, so I have to keep a wee eye on that for the next minute or so. But what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I'm going to mute everybody so that there's not any feedback or interruption during the first part of the talk, because there should be about 100 of us, so I want to make sure that there's no interference with all the coming and goings. So if you don't mind, put your questions in the chat as we go along, or keep them till the end. We'll hopefully have some time for some good discussion at the end. So I think that's really all the housekeeping. I don't have to show you any fire exits or directions to the toilet at this stage. I think we're all well used to working with Teams and Zoom. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started because we have a lot to get through. So, sorry, admit all. I couldn't ask you as well to anybody who's in the audience to turn your camera off, and that should hopefully reduce the load on Zoom. But obviously, if you're going to ask a question or anything towards the end, we can ask you to turn your camera back on just for the presentation section. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share the slideshow and then hand over to the boss. Michal, do you want to say hello before we start?
Yes. If you want to share the screen.
Sorry,
yeah.
I thought I had already. Share screen.
We're seeing it now, Francis, just to start the show. Thank you.
There's a couple of people I think that are joining, but they're not joining, so I have to keep giving them permission. I'll move this down out of the way. We'll get started. So, okay, are we good to go?
Good to go. So you're all very welcome, everybody, to this spring lecture, strictly speaking, it's our spring lecture in the Ulster Placement Society series of lectures, which are biannual. We have 2 every year. This is the first time we've taken to Zoom. So it's interesting for us to try this out, and the response has been great. So we're all very grateful to you for zooming in and joining us. It's fantastic to have such a large crowd. This lecture is named in memory of Deirdre Flanagan. If you can maybe show the next slide, Francis. Our spring lecture is in honour of Deirdre Flanagan, who was a founder member of our society and editor of the first journal, the Bulletin of the Ulster Placement Society. She was a leading authority on placements in Ireland in her day and was a senior lecturer in Celtic Studies here in Queen's at the time of her untimely death in 1984. But her work remains essential reading to this day for anybody who's interested in research in placements. Nobody could possibly do that without reading the material which Deirdre Flanagan wrote back in the 1970s and 80s. So, Jerry, I see there's something in the chat there about an echo. Hopefully that may not be quite so bad as we go along. In any case,
Michal, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, terribly sorry. Don't know what happened.
That was me. I was trying to mute to get the feedback away, but you're okay now. We can hear you.
Okay, that's great. So everybody's heard me so far. So just to say that the website, please note the change in the website address. There it is on the screen for you. We will try and circulate these slides afterwards, Francis, to anybody who wishes to have them, won't we?
Yep, and we're going to be able to record as well. So we're going to upload the presentation.
Okay, so that would be great. So that's just a slide there on the website address. In terms of membership, you will appreciate that we would like to raise this now, obviously, as a society which depends on membership. And there are subscription rates which we think aren't too expensive. For those of you who have a current membership with us, there have been problems with Stripe payments, but we're working on that. for any among you who might like to take out a membership in the Ulster Placement Society, and we're the only placement society in Ireland, and we're not confined to placements in Ulster. We have talks on placements in Ireland in general, and indeed, not surprisingly, in Britain also. So our focus is much wider. Anybody who might be interested in taking out a membership, please get in touch with Francis, and you will see the details there. So finally, we should mention Anam, of course, which is our academic journal, edited by my colleague, Professor Greg Toner, and it's published normally every 2 years. Of course, the COVID pandemic has had an impact, as it has on everything else that we've been doing. And of course, we had no lectures at all last year either. For that reason, as you know, we weren't allowed to have lectures in Queen's in the circumstances. So in any case, it is, of course, our intention to get Anam back up and running again. So if anybody has any academic articles which they're working on and which they think might be suitable for Anam, please do contact Greg. So that takes us on to the newsletter. We do publish a newsletter twice a year. It's our intention to publish the newsletter this time after this evening's lecture, because we think we might like to capture some of the thoughts and some of the information that people will be sharing with you in newsletter form. So look out for that. We'll be putting that up online on the Society website in due course. And finally, just to remind you of the panel discussion and who's involved in the panel tonight. This is a unique event for us because we're obviously trying to get up and running again after COVID, and it seemed very appropriate to us to draw in our colleagues from elsewhere in Ireland. And we're really grateful to Kevin and Pádraig for joining us from UCC and from the Placements branch in Dublin. And also special thanks and welcome to our former colleagues, Pat and Kim from the Placements project, who did so much to keep the Placements project going over the years, contributed such a massive amount on an individual level to the work of the Placements project, indeed to the Society. So we're delighted to have them join us as well, and there are exciting things that they're doing, which they're also going to share with us. And then Francis and I will talk a little bit about Northern Ireland Placement Project at the end. We're conscious there's a lot to say, so we'd rather that you hear from our guests first and foremost, but we will have things to say at the end. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome Pádraig O'Cadwell, a great collaborator of ours, somebody who's been very supportive to the Placements project at Queen's and to placement studies in Queen's more generally down through the years. Pádraig is the Chief Placenames Officer with the Placement branch in Dublin, and he has published widely on placenames, not least his volumes on County Tipperary, which are mentioned there in the slide. So we're delighted to welcome Pádraig in the first instance, and we hand over to you now, Pádraig.
Pádraig, if you just maybe unmute yourself. You might be muted.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. So basically, I suppose I will be sort of addressing the topic, how has the pandemic and so on affected our work, partly at any rate. So unfortunately, it affected us. It coincided with a fall off in staff numbers. We lost a senior placenames officer during the year, in October 2020, and also one member of our clerical staff. So we now have there are now just 2 researchers in the office and 1 backup officer, as it were. And when I started working in the office many years ago, there were 7 researchers there. So it's a big fall off in numbers. At any rate, I just have a slide there for you about Mehel Logan. This is one of our sites, our websites, and it was launched in 2016. And we think it holds great potential. It's an electronic crowdsourcing tool for storing and sharing data on minor place names. There are already 50,000 records roughly in the site, and it's been developed also from the technical point of view by Fiontor DCU. And so the names, their location can be given, but also their pronunciation can be recorded. So we think it has great potential. But also during the pandemic, of course, there has been a big uptake in the number of people using our sites. So you can just see there, I've given the figures for January 21. There were hits, as it were, 6,000 or 6,200, excuse me, hits. And then people who did some work on the site, interactive visits, there were 2,600. So the next slide, please. So the Loganim site has been launched before that in 2008, and there are the total number of place names roughly now, it would have increased slightly. This would be for about a month ago. You would have there are 125,000 English names, and in the Irish names there are 94,000. And partly what we are trying to do, if you like, of course, some English names will not be translated, as it were, but we're trying, partly at any rate, to bridge that gap, as it were. So the next slide, please, Francis. Just to mention that there's also a substantial number of street names in the collection. There are over about 38,000 English street names now in the Loganim website, and these would probably include most of these such names in the Republic or in the state. But we also have some street names from Northern Ireland. And I just wanted, of course, the upshot of all this, of course, is the correspondence that we get. So we estimate that we will deal with about 900 individual names through correspondence this year. Now, these are names that aren't already covered in Loganim or in Mehel, if you like. So it takes up a lot of our time. So the next slide, please. And I just wanted to give you one or two examples from our correspondence of a few names. So, of course, we also get information. So an elderly man from West Clare, he wrote to us a while ago, and he gave us these names that he recalled. One is found in the Ordnance Survey maps, Ballynibean, it's called. It's actually recorded in Irish in 1839 by the Ordnance Survey staff. But it's a subdivision of a townland, and it's obviously the name has obviously been reinterpreted. Peon means pain, of course. But it may come from the surname Pine. But at any rate, he recalls that his mother remembered that this was a small nucleated settlement of 9 houses when she was young, and that these have all gone. He also gave us some other names in the same townland, on Ballinua, the new town, and also on Bohadeen Bui, the name of a road, the Yellow Road, a very common name in Ireland. So the next slide, please. We got a very interesting letter from somebody in Northern Ireland. I won't give you his name because I haven't consulted with him on this matter. So but he mentions the fact that I'm sure many of you are aware of this, the fact that about 50 years ago, that rural road names were introduced, I suppose, by the British British Post Office Service, and that they encourage these names, and that rather than using townland names and traditional addresses. And of course, he says that the result has been a dramatic decline, just a quote from his letter, in the popular knowledge of townland names. You can go on, please, Francis. The next slide. So he asked us, what is the situation like in the Republic? So as you know, Air Code, many of you know this, was launched in 2015 here in the Republic. And this is, of course, a code system for addresses, but the full address is also required by Impost to deliver mail. So, of course, I suppose the letter writer's question was, would this be an acceptable solution for Northern Ireland, where you would have an air code as part of one's address, also with a correct full address, as it were. But I know, again, referring to the pandemic, that many private deliveries were delivering books and so on to all of us, I'm sure, and many of them required an air code address. So I can't really say, I don't know whether this will have a detrimental effect on the use of traditional addresses in the Republic yet. So the next slide, please. Just to give you a brief outline here, some of the work, sort of our core work, would be place names orders. These give place names the same status as their English counterparts. And up to now, we do these through place names orders. These would be brought before, signed by the relevant minister, normally the Minister of the Gaeltacht. And up to this, over 30,000 place names had been given legal status. You can go on, please. And there are, as you see, there are quite a considerable number from 2012 that are in draft place name form. These have been examined by ourselves, researched by ourselves, examined by the Place Names Committee, and the public have commented on them. But there's just a technical problem that the Place Names Commission, which was there up to 2012, it says in the Official Languages Act that the Place Names Commission has to advise the minister on the place names orders, as it were. So this has to be changed because the Place Names Committee has replaced the Place Names Commission in 2012, and this has to be changed. And actually, the Official Languages Act is before the Dáil at present, and it will be changed, hopefully before too long. So there are about nearly 13,000 place names in those draft place names also. So you can go on, Francis, please. And this is just a little map of our work. The dark blue shows the counties for which place names orders have been signed. These would include all the administrative names, townland names, and the more important geographic names. And the light blue are draft orders. So we are working on the other counties. At present, we're working on County Meath and on County Clare. And we have also marked in the areas in Northern Ireland for which covered in the very good series of individual volumes, Place Names of Northern Ireland. So you can go on, Francis, please. Thank you. So just I mentioned this, that we have a Place Names Committee. It's an independent advisory body that oversees our work and that also advises the government, as it were, on the place names. And I've just given you an example here of, you can go on to the, actually, yeah. So I've just given you, at present, they are working on reviewing the names of County Kerry. And I should mention that Francis is on the Place Names Commission at present and the Place Names Committee. And there were also, prior to that, Micheál O'Manine served as a member. So we're very grateful to have that connection between ourselves and Northern Ireland place names. But just to give you an example of the sort of work, that the problems that occur, how do you spell names, as it were, how standardized spelling? And one such name is the name of a parish in Kerry. It's now called O'Brennan. It isn't a surname though. It comes from Uav Breanin. So Uav, in fact, means a cave in this place name. Breanin, of course, is the well-known saint, Saint Brendan the Navigator, as he's sometimes called. There are other examples of the same word in place names in Kerry. In the genitive form, you have Knock-na-ho, which would have been pronounced Knock-na-ho. And also there are a number of minor names. Owen, it's pronounced, and it means souterrain. So the place names, having looked at the Place Names Committee, decided that they should be spelled as Uiv or Owen, as distinct from Owen. But of course, there are related words then, for instance, the word for a small cove, which has been very ably discussed by Fiachra McGowan in Anim, 2014. Words such as or at least one word, maybe more, for spelled Uich or U-I-G-H, for running from North Galway to Donegal. Like an example would be Uí, or Owie, the island of Donegal. And well, Fiachra thinks that these may come from UMHIGH, or a collective noun originally, or perhaps a dative form with a consonantal stem, UMHIDH. So, of course, there are other words then. There's the word foe for a small cove in West Connemara, and I presume that is related. But again, it's interesting how do you standardize all of these, or how do you bring them together? How how many of them can be brought together, as it were, under one spelling. So you can go on, Francis, please. We are also researching the place names of County Meath at present. My colleague Cahúr Ó Crualaí is doing that work. And an interesting name that occurred was Castle Cord. It's in Northwest Meath. In Irish, it's on Coshlan Cord. Actually, the Irish name is recorded in the Historical Dictionary of Gaelic Place Names, one of the editors of which is Kevin Murray. But I just noticed an interesting point when we were discussing the name, we were deciding on the Irish forum with Cahúr Ó Crualaí. In the Ordnance Survey letters, it says that the parish is called Cailvride, but by the natives who know very little English. This was in 1836 in North West Meath. I thought that was interesting. So at any rate, we'll go on, Francis, please. And we're also writing up explanatory notes on names. This is something we'd very much like to develop more, and hopefully we will be able to do so. But because of staffing difficulties, it's proving really it's very difficult at present to do so. But we are working on the notes. So we've researched names of Kildare, and they're very, very interesting. The names there, you get a curious mixture of translations from Irish into English, both languages. And this is just one example. Two adjacent townlands called Iron Hills and Eagle Hill, just south of Kildare town. So Iron Hills is referred to as Earn Hill in 1583. And then subsequently in the Down Survey, about 1655, it became Iron Hill. It was reinterpreted, obviously. And then the nearby townland of Eagle Hill, it doesn't occur until 1778, where it's spelled Eagle Hill. But that name, there's an earlier reference to it in an important collection of references to church sites that were compiled by Bishop Gehagen in 1629 about, roughly. And he refers to it as, he refers to the cemetery of Knockanollard. Now that is the same.
Padraig, we've lost your sound. I don't know if you can still hear us. Have you maybe been muted or something? We haven't heard you for maybe a minute or so now. Can't hear anything.
Sorry, did you hear what I said about Earn Hill? No?
We heard you stopped at Crocaniller.
Yeah, so basically you have this strange mixture. You have an Irish name, Knockanollard, referring to the same place. You have Earn Hill. Earn comes from Earn, which is a Middle English word for eagle. So you have this word that was obviously introduced by the Anglo-Normans at an early stage, Earn Hill. It was translated back into English as Eagle Hill. And you also have the Gaelic name, Knockanollard. Which name came first? It's really impossible to say, I'd say, but it's very, very interesting to have this mixture. So you can just go on, Francis. I'll just be one more minute. We are also working on, we have a glossary of the common words. This is part of these can be accessed through the Loganim site. And we are working in tandem with, working with the drawing from the Northern Ireland Place Names website to ensure that there is a better representation of the place names from Northern Ireland. These would be the common toponymic elements. There are 196 of them at present, distributive maps of these. So this is just one example, Sart, which means a grave mound, and also Sarta. And there's a very interesting collection of these words. It's an early word, of course, for Greymount, but there's a very interesting collection there grouped around in South Ulster, around the Monaghan area, Armagh and Cavan to the south of that. Very, very interesting. And in the same area, you also have quite a large number of words containing the word lacht or lachte, which of course overlaps in meaning. This, again, maybe this would be, I might be able to discuss this at a further stage, why that is, why they are both located in this area. And just finally, I'll refer briefly to this. We're developing a series of maps on elements containing trees or woods and so on. And we're hoping to produce maps, a series of maps whereby the names will be overlaid on maps showing information about these names, such as their location, the type of land there, the height of the names, and so on. This is something, these active maps, I think, will provide a lot of information, and we are hoping to develop this. This is just an example from County Laois. So thank you very much, and I leave it at that.
Thanks, Padraig. Moving straight without any wasting any time. Kevin, if you want to come on ahead. Thanks again, Padraig. I'm sure there's a lot to pick up there in the discussion section. If you want to unmute yourself, Kevin, we're good to go with
Yeah, I hope. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Grand. Okay, so gur maithas gura agus tá seanna asfe an sot live a nocht. So the next slide, please, Francis, or the first. Right, so some of you will know about the Locust project, but for those of you who don't, our remit and our goal is to update and replace Edmund Hogan's Onomasticon Godelicum. And for all of you who have worked on place names, you know that Hogan's Onomasticon has been what we might call a bunchloch. It has been a foundational text for us. And it was a project that was begun, and I'm here talking on behalf of my colleagues, Padraig O'Rian, Emma Nicorrig, and not to forget, of course, the late lamented Jim de Mordechou. And basically, Hogan's Onomasticon came out in 1910. And for the last 25 years, we have been working on trying to replace this with our historical dictionary of Gaelic place names. And we're focusing mainly on Irish place and tribal names, mainly written in the Irish language, but some in Latin, in sources dated to before 1800. Now, as I said, the timeline is 1996 to present. So I came to Cork 25 years ago to begin working on this project, and I'm still here. And we reckon there'll be another, it'll see me out anyway. That's as far as I can go with it. So thus far, we have 8 volumes of the Historical Dictionary published, 2 supplementary volumes, one on the scholarship concerning the Onomasticon, and many of our colleagues were involved in that, and a bibliography of publications on place names, along with many articles. Now, I did a count there recently of the 8 volumes which have been published, and there are approximately 16,000 place names treated of to date in the 8 fascicles. And even though we're on E at the moment, on the letter E, which might sound like we're still starting, actually we're well past the halfway mark. We expect the final completed work to comprise about 13 or 14 volumes. Next slide, please, Francis. Thank you. Now, the important thing, I suppose, is we're talking here tonight about what's happening during the pandemic and how we're coping. The important thing for us is that during the pandemic, we managed to get out our next volume of the Historical Dictionary. So that's Padraig, myself, and Emma's Historical Dictionary Gaelic Place Names, Fascicle 8. And this was our major aim. And we did this by sustaining ourselves by doing our meetings through Microsoft Teams online and doing a lot of our research online. But I'll explain in a moment that while there was great benefit in that, there was also problems in actually bringing some things to a successful conclusion. Now, over the next 12 months, because you know this, I suppose the ripple effect of the pandemic will go on for another bit. We expect to have Fascicle 9 published by the end of 2022. That'll be E and at least part, if not all, of F. And then we will move on to the volume prepared by the postdoctoral scholar, Dr. Riona Doolan. And at the same time, there will be a PhD thesis on the letter L coming to its conclusion, which will be also submitted in 2022. So we're trying in some way to future-proof the project by having younger scholars coming through who are working as doctoral scholars and postdoctoral scholars on the project. Now, this has only been facilitated by the fact that we have 2 at the moment within the department. But one thing that must be said is that they not only do they work on place names, but they are active on other areas within the discipline. And we think this is very important. We don't want anyone, while like Cian is doing his PhD in this, for example, Riona's PhD was in the area of Brehon law. So their recent publications reflect their interests, not only in place names, but Riona, for example, had a very important article on reference and commentaries in the law texts, while Cian just brought out an edition of the poem Rathlin. And basically what we're trying to do is not just future-proof the project, but future-proof the scholars who are working on the project. So they're seen as scholars who can, you know, cross many areas within the broader field of early medieval Irish and modern Irish as well. So next slide, please, Francis. Now, very important part of our work, and it's part of our work within the project, and it's as Padraig mentioned there a moment ago, the great thing about being involved in place name studies is the collegiality and the help we give each other and the questions we ask of each other and the queries we send each other. So mostly our collaborations, and I was trying to explain this recently inside UCC, why we weren't collaborating with the department next to us. Well, I said, well, our collaborations are with external forces like the Northern Ireland Place Name Project, obviously, Scottish Place Name Society, and Branchel Lig Anamnacha. And for example, Dr. Emma Nicoric from the Locus Project was appointed to the Place Names Committee to Cushta Lig Anamnacha in January 2020. Now, the funding landscape for now and going into the future is a very, very important part. It's a hard part for all of us, and those on the call will know this. We were lucky in 2018 for securing funding from Mr. Brian McCarthy and the Board of Exco and St. Finian's Trust, which allowed for the funding of a doctoral scholar, Cian O'Keneally, the deployment of a postdoctoral scholar, Riona Doolan. And we were lucky as well as when their research came, no, I won't say to shuttering up, but when the research was restricted by the onset of the pandemic, because of this, UCC kindly, and then the HEA as well, made funding available to cover the months they had lost. And that made a huge difference so that Cian will be in a position to finish and submit, and the Riona will be in a position to finish her work on the letter F. Now, just to mention, it's something that we all know, but funding will remain a problem into the future. And really the issue is that you keep trying to have to access different funding streams because we're doing the same type of research. We are anyway. We're trying to complete and bring to a conclusion the historical dictionary of Gaelic place names. So when we get funding for the letter B, for example, then we're going looking for the funding for the letter D, and the work is the same. And so it's very hard to keep reinventing yourself to try and get funding for the same type of work that you're doing. But we aim to try and get some more. We have a couple of irons in the fire at the moment, and we're hoping one or two of them might prove successful to allow for the employment of future doctoral scholars, etc. Now, I suppose the great thing about the era at which this COVID-19 pandemic happened from a scholarly point of view is the digital resources that are now available. So if a shutdown like this happened 20 years ago, we would have found it incredibly difficult to continue with our work. But with the creation of a significant number of digital resources, and Padraig has shown you some of them already, it has allowed a lot of our work to continue. Though I have to say, we still couldn't complete the volume until the Boole Library was opened again, special collections, because there's an awful lot of material in there for us, which we couldn't access online and couldn't access anywhere else. So just some of the more important ones you think of, for example, of, these are the text sites now to begin with, archive.org, JSTOR, when you have a license, the Celt Project, Celtic Digital Images, Codex. All of these are really important for us in the Locus Project to access the texts that we are examining in order to formulate our text that we have for the books, which underpins, of course, the work that we do on the place names. Now, I see somebody's come in with sound is lost. Is my sound gone?
No.
I can still hear you, Kevin.
Oh, you can. Okay. So sorry, it's just a message popped up. Yeah, thanks, Francis. So, and I just want to bring out your attention. Now, most of your members will know of these. Anybody who's working in the field will know of these. But of the really important digital resources that are there for the Locus Project. So, for example, if we have a place name that comes up in Northern Ireland, once we have our initial entry down, the first place we go is either to Pat Mackay's wonderful book or to the Place Names northernireland.org website to check what's there, what other resources, what other examples might be there. Next one, please, Francis. Here, of course, we've been accessing the maps. We've been accessing them. We must be on our third or fourth site at the moment for accessing the 6-inch maps. And at the moment we're using heritagemaps.ie, and that just gives you an example there. And I was just reminded today of when I started the Locus project, one of my jobs was on Thursday mornings before the meetings to go over to special collections, and Deirdre used to always have me lifting out the big 6-inch maps for him out of the cupboard where they were kept. But now, of course, we access all of these maps online. And next one, please, Francis. Of course, the wonderful luganum.ie website, which we all use and which is so wonderful and which gives us so many drawers also. So what we often do is we'll have a big entry put together. We might have 10 or 12 references to a place. Then we'll double check on luganum.ie that they have the same answer as us, if they do, and generally do, thankfully. And then we go through their sources to see what ones we miss, and we'll often pick up another 1 or 2 references or 3 references that way. So it's great. Additional references, and it's just a wonderful site, and we use it all the time. Next one, please. Then, of course, the Townland database is crucial just to be able to search it, and there's various iterations of this. This is my favorite one, which went offline for a while and came back in a different place, but at least it's there. There's the Sean Rua one, the Townland database search, which is a wonderful way of just searching different parishes, baronies, townlands, etc., etc. Next one, please. And then, of course, anytime we have any question on Scotland, as well as looking at the publisher sources, we go to Animan Archa. And again, it's wonderful for us because we don't do an awful lot of Scottish place names, but there are a certain number of early ones that are current early texts that we do include, and we like to have as much up-to-date knowledge as possible about this. So next slide, please. So just to bring it, I suppose, the important thing to say is that the work has continued. It has been harder. We weren't able to bring the last fascicle out until we were able to do a lot of the work online, but in the end we had to wait for special collections in the Boo Library to open, so that we had an awful lot of queries at the end, manuscript references we had to check, old works that are not online and books that we had to deal with, and an awful lot of things, sort of queries we had left to the end. But we were able to do it once special collections open, and special collections still tell you that we are their best customers. And that's to be found, if anybody's interested in it, you can be bought online on the Royal Irish Academy website, and they sell the books for the Irish Text Society. And then there's some other works there that I just mentioned. And the next one, please, Francis. And then just more that are coming out, all to do with our work that stemmed from our work on place names. And just the final one there, Francis, please. Just say, that's me done. Just say, Gura Mahagiv. It's been different. It's not been as much fun. The meetings have been okay because there's 3 of us regularly in the editorial meetings, Emma, Padraig, and myself. We've managed to get the work done. It's when things got good last summer, we were able to go around to Padraig's house for a little while and do some of our meetings outdoors. And hopefully later on this year, we'll be back to the same. But it's a challenging environment, but I think the presence of digital resources and the presence of wonderful colleagues that one can send emails to and send queries to facilitates the type of work we're doing. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kevin. So next up we have Kay Muir. If you want to unmute yourself, Kay, please.
I wondered where you found that old photo from.
I recognize the background anyway.
Yes, I'm sure you do. That's the project office. Right. Yes, well, I think, I'm afraid, I mean, I have been working on the surnames, I realised, for 20 years, since I realised that how important they were to place names. I think you could start the slide. Right, I thought pictures tell a lot. This imposing looking volume, don't you agree, has indeed been decided to be green, which is a relief. It is very large, it is very expensive, but there is a lot in it, and I will try and explain what you will find if you have the chance to open a copy. Sadly, the online version, including the wonderful distribution maps by Stephen Archer, will also be available, but at an extra price. So that is the story there. Now, what else did I mean to say under this? Yes, I started with the Dictionary of American Family Names. Then it was decided to try and update Rainey's Dictionary of, I forget which he called it now, because the business of whether it's British or English or whatever, luckily with the Dictionary of Family Names of Britain and Ireland, which this is an offshoot of, we managed to get the names of both islands into the title. So Liam has not been working on surnames for quite as long as me, good for him, but he has been working on the Dictionary of Family Names of Britain and Ireland too, for more years, I think, than either of us prefer to think about. But he has been a wonderful colleague. Because these things are big works, they need a database like place names do. The databases are complicated. If you ask the query wrong, the answer doesn't come out how you expect. And also, of course, so much is now digitized, including the census, and that is where the list of names of the greatest frequency in Ireland, over 100 bearers, this dictionary is based on. We wished we could take it down to 80 bearers, but in fact it would have taken us several years more work, so neither of us could bear that. And I think the pandemic, certainly for me, who didn't have any other job, meant I could just get on with this. For poor Liam, who was teaching online as well, I think it's been a great deal more difficult. But at least the main text is now done and we are proofreading. The dictionary includes all the surnames in Ireland which had over 100 bearers in the 1911 census. It's not just about Irish language names, nor is it just about names that came in Norman times. It's everything that was there in 1911. The reason for 1911 is that it is the only reliable source of the statistics of the surnames for both islands. Unfortunately, you could get data for Britain and the United Kingdom, which you cannot get for the Republic of Ireland yet, partly because the names become very precise. Some of them are very small, much, much smaller than 100 bearers. And I think there was a feeling that privacy issues were involved. As for the names that have come into Ireland from outside, we were very lucky that we were allowed to use the data collected for the family names of Britain and Ireland, published in 2016. But we have had to adapt it to a considerable extent because our dictionary of Irish names for the first time includes early bearers. So you have, for as early as we can find them from major sources, up until the 19th century, you will have examples of people bearing each surname. But when it came to the imported names, the Norman names, the Welsh names, the English names, we had to start afresh and write the history of the name in Ireland. So with any luck from the early bearers, you will be able to work out when the name came in. Now, this gives you a bit more about the numbers. So let's say we have the origin, the meaning, the frequency, the geographical distribution, and samples of early bearers. Now, I threw in 850 to 1850 AD. Obviously, you don't have surnames before 850 anyway. I'm not going to talk about that now. Sometimes we have had to bring the name up to 1850 in the Griffiths valuation, but I think very often we finished at the beginning of the 19th century when there was plenty of evidence for a name. The turnout to be of names with over 100 bearers, nearly 4,000, 3,828 in, as I say, the census of Ireland North and South, the last one before partition. The dictionary uses the English language, the anglicised form, as the head words, but we do offer an index of standardised Irish forms. It's just a suggestion. You are not insisting that people use that or it is the only correct form, because sometimes one still cannot be totally sure. The distribution of the names is interesting. There are only 338 of that number with more than 2,500 bearers, and only 8 with only 20,000 bearers. 2,500 names have between 100 and 500 bearers, and there are many, many more names with fewer than 100 bearers than these. So it's a strange sort of sample in a way, based on statistics and where most people will find their name, but there will be a lot disappointed. And if anybody is brave enough, there is another book to be written. Right, next please, Francis, I think. I particularly regret the great range of names that begin Macgilla and a saint's name, because they get anglicised in so many different ways. You often, you cannot, there are not 100 of them, so they get missed out. Now, this pie chart gives the linguistic origins of the family names in Ireland with over 100 bearers. I don't know if it's a shock for anybody. Half of the names are Irish Gaelic in origin. A quarter of them are English language in origin. English language in origin, because of course we're dealing with transliterated English spelling anyway. We kept the Norman names separate in this distribution, which they did not do for family names of Britain and Ireland, because their development in Ireland is so different from the development in Britain. Obviously, they're in a different linguistic situation. Scottish names are what we count as coming from Scotland pretty clearly, and of course a lot of people have come in from Scotland. Scottish Gaelic, I should explain, as being, we have some sources much earlier for names in Scotland than in Ireland. It's the same language, basically. The names are really the same, but sometimes you can see that one must have begun in Scotland rather than Ireland. So Manx, at that very small number, that's a different story, really. Manx names are extremely difficult to distinguish between Irish forms. They're usually more reduced. They've lost Mac, and I think we have no evidence for ones in O. Welsh are also interesting. Up to the 18th century, Welsh surnames as such didn't exist. It was a patronymic system similar to the Gaelic one, but it didn't gel into surnames until very late. And in fact, far more of the Welsh incomers to Ireland, it's a place not very far from the east coast of Ireland, probably ended up as Walsh, which is one of the major names. And another thing that Liam was quick to point out is that also a lot of Irish Gaelic names are now represented by similar names in English, usually roughly similar phonetically, occasionally because they are thought to mean the same thing. Right, next one, please. I'm not watching my watch properly, but Francis, you keep me right. Now, all the names that we are dealing with are anglicised because they are the most familiar forms to people. Of course, a lot more people are now using the Irish language name of the form of their surname, but I'm afraid this is sort of, for practical reasons, this is what the generality of people use. And the way that the Irish language surnames were adapted for use in English are three, and this is probably in chronological order as well. First of all, you get the transliterated forms, viz. The pronunciation of the Irish language name simply being respelled as best as can be done into English. And interestingly, when you look at the early bearers, you can see that what the early transliterators heard is not the Irish that you would hear today. You get evidence for earlier pronunciations of the language. I put some examples in there, but I'm not going to talk about them. I know there's not time, but you see roughly what I mean. O'Brien, which I think I meant to mention before, is the only name in the ones with over 20,000 bearers that had an O in 1911. The O was generally dropped. It's sort of before the stress, as well as being discouraged by English, and Mac the same, so that one cannot entirely blame the transliterators for often missing them out. It wasn't just politics. I think it was also the way that things were heard, because O'Kelly and O'Murphy ought to also exist. Now, adoptions, I think because of the that Ireland was, no, not yet, where are we jumping to? The adoptions, because a lot of the settlers had a great deal more political clout during the historical, Ireland being ruled from England than the natives. It was often quite a good thing to adopt a name that had made some sense to the people you were having to deal with. This doesn't mean that people forgot what their own surname was. There are examples which show that people knew that right through, like O'Halpine and Halfpenny, but certainly names of English and Norman origin were quite often adopted by Irish speakers to represent their surname. I think Harrington is O'Harachtan, and I think probably we can identify the particular Harrington who was influential. And I think that will more and more become possible. When an adoption occurs, it's usually in a particular area where a particular individual is known and is influential. They aren't picked out of a list, a telephone book or anything. They are something that people have experienced. Now, Thornton was actually a name adopted because of its meaning. So this is O'Drynan, from Blackthorn. So that's a sort of explanation of that. But usually they are from their phonetic similarity, pretty rough often. And then translated names. Clark is O'Clery in Irish. The word means the same and is of the same Latin origin in both languages. Flood, anything with tull in, bird, anything with ain in, early, anything with moch in. These are often very rough and entertaining translations, and rabbit with conin in. Right, on we go. Can I have the next one, please? Is that stuck, Francis? Oh, sorry, it's the one before this now. They've jumped in when I wasn't looking.
Sorry.
Right, sorry.
The right one there, the map, okay?
No, the one before it, I think. Yes. No? Oh, sorry. Have I got them the other way round? Sorry, that's fine. We'll use with you. Sorry, it's me, Francis. The map, please. Yes, we have a few maps in the introduction of the book, but this is a bit of a special because it is showing you not only the distribution, dark, the most of Fallon from O'Folivin, but also in the checkered area over in the northeast, a different anglicisation, Falloon. Now, these sort of different anglicisations are talked about in the book. This is a special map where we asked, could we please have one, which showed how names were quite often transliterated differently according to different areas, whether because they pronounced the name differently at the same time, or quite often because the name might have been transliterated at a different time in each area. Right, I think we'll go on to Bradley now then. I'm sorry for my muddle there. Now that was an example of transliteration. Now this is an example of an adoption. The learned and ecclesiastical family of O'Brolachan, which universally by about the mid-18th century became Bradley. Translations, I think, quite often are even later than that. So people went on using a version of the name in Irish for a very long time, which I think is often forgotten. Now, this is just a sample of the early bearers. It was a famous name. So you have Melbricht Brolachan, the chief right of Ireland, 1029, a master of wisdom and piety in 1086, a bishop in, I think he's 1101, is he? Then we have the anglicised forms of that name, O'Brillachan in Donegal in 1660, O'Brallachan in Dungiven, still a stronghold of the name, but not in this form anymore, in 1663. And then I don't know if it's, if you can not see it because of the few people down the right of your screen, but we have here an example of a proof of what happened to the name. The Reverend Patrick Bradley, or Brillahan, Roman Catholic Bishop of Derry in 1751, as recorded in the Ordnance Survey memoirs. Now, those sort of things which show you where the adoption, where and when the adoption happened, are very valuable. There was a whole lot of oral tradition about these things when O'Donovan was writing, and even when Wolfe was writing and MacLeisach. There's very much less of it now. So one is really grateful to get a proof that this really is what happened to this name. You can also look in Balnaskeen graveyard, where there are Brolachan gravestones, and then at about second half of the 18th century, they suddenly all become Bradley. Now, I think probably I should stop there. I hope I've given you a sample. I may not have said at all the things that I meant to say, but I think the work has been very valuable and interesting. There is a lot, linguistic, cultural, all sorts of things there. I do apologise for the huge price that Oxford University Press puts on these things. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Kay. That was fantastic. I'm going to keep going, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end. If I can just move on to Pat's holding slide. I'm going to circulate these after, so I don't need to. You don't need to panic read the short bios. And I'm just going to move on to Pat's first slide. Pat, if you are ready to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thanks, Pat.
Goramila Mayagov, Goramayagut, Francis Asson, Corey Shaw, Horster. Thanks for the invite to speak at this. A few years ago, a good while before the COVID emergency, I was asked to provide Irish language versions for the road names of the Council of Mid-Ulster. In fact, that was about 2,000 road names. So quite a tall order, I want to. The first slide I have is showing you the district council, the 11 district councils of Northern Ireland. These were originally 26 councils, and there are now 11. They're now referred to quite a lot as super councils, but you can see Mid-Ulster Council here. It's made up of the three former councils. One of them was Maherfelt, which was up here, and then you have Cookstown. No, I shouldn't have. Can people still see the? Can people still see the map? Sorry.
Yeah.
I must have accidentally reduced it in size. Sorry. Beg your pardon. Sorry about that. The Mid-Ulster Council, anyway, it was made up of former councils of Maherfelt, Cookstown, and Dungannon, and South Tyrone. And if you cross the Ban here at Tuam, it's quite a large. It's quite a large area. It stretches from Tuam away westwards to the border with Fermanagh. Maybe I should stop trying to point these things out because it seems to be upsetting, but sorry about that. And it's quite a large council. We'll move on to the next slide, Francis. This is the Collins map of Ireland, which was published in 2017. The reason I'm showing that is that it doesn't show any counties in Northern Ireland. It shows you, instead of counties in Northern Ireland, it shows you the district councils. I wrote to Collins about this, saying, you know, it's a pity because the councils are historically important. And I got a letter back saying that this isn't a historical map. The function of the map is to show the modern administrative areas. So it just looks a bit strange when you look at the map and you see we've no longer got counties marked. I wonder if it's the same with the Ordnance Survey maps as it is with this Collins map. It's sad that in Northern Ireland, counties have now joined baronies and civil parishes and townlands in the list of administrative units, which are now more or less obsolete. When you think of how passionate people are about their counties, and I suppose a lot of that is down to the GAA, but it's hard to see people getting so passionate about divisions such as Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon, or Mid and East Antrim, or indeed Mid Ulster. I could move on to the next slide, please. This is Mid Ulster Council showing the electoral wards. I'm sorry, you won't be able to read the names of the wards, but it shows you how the Mid Ulster Council is divided up for administration purposes. As I said before, we have 2,000 road names stretching all the way to the border with Fermanagh. This is, you can't read it, but it says 5 Mile Town, and up here is Fermanagh. Okay, move on to the next slide, please. This is just a sample page from the Excel spreadsheet, which I was given to work on, and you can see the different headings. First, the name of the town, then we're asked for the Irish name of the town, then asked the name of, the Irish name of the road, sorry. Name of the road is first, sorry. Name is, name of the road, then Irish name of the road, then in the town land with or town lands. Some of them go through quite a lot of town lands. When I started this work, as you see down here, I had worked out how to fit all the town lands in onto every road. But I was from the LPS, the language and the LPS website, but I was advised that this wasn't necessary to say what all the town lands that each road goes through. So in fact, that didn't take me as long then as I thought. Then the signage town, that's in the name of the town land in which the road sign is in, and then the town land name that the road sign is in, and then the county and the parish and the ward. I started off intending to put in wards, but I was advised that that wasn't really my role, so I didn't persist with putting in the wards. Okay, could we move on to the next? Just samples to show you the development of road name signage in Northern Ireland. This is the road where I was born and reared. It's not in Mid Ulster, but it's on the north shore of Lough Neagh, Blackrock Road, and that was the general policy, as Parrig has referred to, when town land names were replaced by road names. They just put up the road name and nothing else on each road, and that's like a bog standard road name with no other information. Could move on, please. Next slide, Francis. Then Moorfield Road, and this shows you the next development. It says Moorfield Road in the townland of Maharabeg, and it's interesting that This is in Banbridge area. A well-known Orange man, interestingly enough, named Drew Nelson, who sadly died a few years ago. He boasted that he had persuaded Banbridge District Council to become the very first district council in Northern Ireland to include the name of the townland on the road name signage. So the council is no longer known as Banbridge, it's Armagh City, Banbridge and Craigavon. And you can read it down here. It says, in response to public demand, Banbridge District Council have initiated a policy of including the appropriate townland name on any new road name sign being erected in the district. Move on to the next one. The LPS is lands and properties. Lands and properties. Service, lands and property services. Sorry, I meant to say that earlier. This is a lovely sign here, Cran Cussy Road in the townland of Evish, Cran Cussy. It's a beautiful townland name, Evish, Cran Cussy. And in this case, they've taken a part of the townland name and they've just used part of the name to name the road. And this is in Cookstown, the old Cookstown District Council, which is now Mid-Ulster. And it shows that most councils decided to follow Banbridge in including the name of the townland on the sign which contains the road name. In this case, yeah, Evisha Cran Cussy, and this is in the parish of Kildress, which is west of Cookstown. And we'll move on, Francis. Not all councils adopted the policy of putting the road name on the putting the townland name along with the road name. This is very near where I'm from, again on the north shore of Lough Neagh, and it just says Ballinamullen Road, Borough of Antrim. So Antrim are one of the councils that refused to take Drew Nelson's advice, follow Banbridge in putting the townland name up as well as the name of the road. Next one, please, Francis. Now we're into Mid-Ulster Council because we've crossed the Ban. Once you cross the Ban, you're into Mid-Ulster Council District, and this shows you that Mid-Ulster decided to go the whole hog. Not only do we get the name of the townland below the road name, we get the name of the road in Irish, and we get the name of the townland that's in Irish. So we have Hillhead and Shanwulloch, so Boher and Shanwully, Hillhead Road, and then the townland is called the Craig. It's a big flat townland just west of the Ban and very much Sheemashini country, and we have the Irish version of it. So that's your Mid-Ulster Council, as far as I'm aware, we're the first to do this and go the whole hog. And this is where I come in. I was the one that was asked to advise. I wasn't there from the very beginning, so some of them were put up before I was asked to do this. But anyway, this was one of the earliest ones. Could we move on, please, Francis? And then some of the street names are just straightforward translations from English to Irish, and we have Gulf Terrace, for example, and then again the full works we have. It's in the townland, Town Parks in Marrafelt, and the townland is also a direct translation of English. So in some ways, they were the easiest ones to deal with because you're just translating directly. We'll move on to the next one. And here's an example of the most modern, the latest design that they've adopted. This is Bawn View, and the Bawn in question is Balachi Bawn in Balachi, and it's a translation from English. But they've left out the H, unfortunately, in the middle of Rurk. So Rurk and Walwyn, and then the townland is Old Town Deer Park, Bala Achi Park and Ia. Malachi, of course, it's Malachi, and then Park, and the is a translation of the English, Deer Park. Okay. So there's a more modern mid-Ulster signage. The latest. We'll move on to 13 and Tully Reevy Road, Boher Holly Railway, and the sign happens to be in the same in the townland of Tully Reevy as well. We all know how road names replace townlands in postal addresses as Parag has referred to in the 1970s. But how were the roads named? How did they pick the names for the roads? The answer is it's no problem with major roads, because they're usually just names. Like you would have Dungannon Road in Cookstown and Cookstown Road in Dungannon. Those weren't any problem. But when it comes to minor names, they adopted the name of the townland where the minor name met the major, where it stopped, where it branched off from the first major road, and that was regarded as the start of the minor road. So this one must be in the townland of Tully Reevy. So it must be at the start of Tully Reevy Road. We can work that out. Next slide, and this is an example of Mayo Gall Road, where the townland is different from the name of the road, which shows that this one isn't at the beginning of the road, because the road would be, if it were, it would be Gulladuff Road, but it's not. It's obviously a road, because the Gulladuff Road would be the same name for the road and the townland that starts in, but this must be farther along, where there's another junction, and so the road has run into a different townland, which is called Mayo, which is called Gulladuff. The Mayo Gall Road has run into a different townland, which is called Gulladuff. Now, is it all straightforward? No, it's definitely not. There are problems, and this is a good example. Gulladuff is in Professor Greg Toner's book on the Moyola Valley, and he suggested Gulladu, and I, in common with the policy with regard with the Irish article, I recommended Anhula, who to suit the general way that we deal with names like this. So that's what went up on the sign, and it was quite urgent. So sometimes I would get a phone call saying, "Oh, the sign's going up here in a couple of weeks." You didn't have much time to. Anyway, I thought that sounded reasonable enough. Again, it's the townland name. So if we move on to the next one, you can see the problem. Gulladuff Hill is in the townland of Gulladuff, but it's Cock na Nola Dua, and the reason for that is that since Greg Toner's book was done, then an Irish language source, someone drew my attention to an Irish language source. It's a story named Achtra Krugi na Kriga is na Kritcha is an Chumpan, which means the adventure of the hairy one, of the crag, and of the harp, and of the psaltery. Now, interestingly, it contains a number of South Derry place names, and one of them is Gulladuff, which is Nagola Dua. So for that reason, the Irish language officer, I think it was agreed that the Gulladuff, the real Irish form, should be Nagola Dua, on the strength of this Irish story, the manuscript of which is dated to 15 to 1715. So it just gives you an example of how there can be discrepancies sometimes, and not even ones based on literary evidence like that, but people, sometimes you'll find that there's not universal agreement about the form of Irish placing it. So it just, I think what it does, it throws up the importance of getting some sort of standardized forms of all the place names in Northern Ireland. We don't have what they have on the other side of the border, which is the legal status that the place names have. So to me, it's one of the things that's needed in Northern Ireland. And I'm very hopeful that as things go on, and I think if we did have an Irish Language Act, that would be one of the things that would have to be provided. And I'm hopeful that that will come along in the very near future. Okay, that's really all I have to say. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much, Pat. Sorry, I think I'm going too far here. So just kind of rounding off then, Micheál and I are going to talk a bit about where the project is. Micheál, would you like to go first?
Absolutely, Frances. And we're very grateful to all the speakers, and we'll just, as you say, finish up here with a little on the current state of play with the Northern Ireland Place Name project. I know you would want to hear about that, but we also are conscious of time pushing on. So we'll try and cover this as quickly as possible and then allow some time for questions at the end. So our current position, funding is always a problem for us. Kevin alluded to also in the course, in the context of Locus in University College Cork. Universities always require you to bring in money for your research projects, and we are similar to Locus in that respect. So we're always looking for external funding, but the last 4 years have been kind to us in that since 2017, we've been funded by the Department of Finance here in Belfast. And the first tranche of funding was for 3 years. Frances will talk about what we were doing for that. We're concentrating on the townland names. And the current year is really to do work in response to queries from councils on street and road names and some of the related work. So, of course, it does beg the question as to where we will be next year. We have an application in for some funding with a colleague in geography here in Queen's for work on the Ordnance Survey. If that were to materialise, it would bring us money for a further year. So we have to wait and see if we're lucky enough to get that funding. But in any case, that's where things currently stand. At the moment, our emphasis, however, is on getting the database sorted, because our database, as Kay will know and Pat will know and Greg will know, and anybody who's ever worked on the project, our database has been more than 20 years of growing, to paraphrase the Irish language text. It goes right back to 1987 and it has gone through various iterations in between. We have brought the database back from Land and Property Services, where it resided until recently. That created methodological problems for us in terms of how we, if you like, engage with the public, especially because we didn't have control of the website when it wasn't in Queen's itself. And there were difficulties around that, and we felt we needed maybe to have that control. And therefore the database has been returned to Queen's, but having been returned to Queen's, now we have the challenge of what we now need to do, which is to create a new database and to enhance what we provide in that way. So that is really what we've been doing over the last couple of months, while Frances and I have also been trying to continue answering queries from the councils and from the public. But obviously we would wish to have, if you like, a more modern database in which we would have further features like sound clips. One of the things that people really like to have is an indication of what a place sounds like. How is it pronounced locally by the people? And this sort of work is very expensive. When we started on the Northern Ireland Place Name project many years ago, it required us going to the field, which is very pleasant and extremely enjoyable. It's very, very time consuming and therefore expensive. And we'll be looking to perhaps do this differently going forward. Once we have our new database up and running, we'll be looking maybe to crowdsource this sort of information and to put up a sound file, a sound clip, if you like, on the website. And of course, Logan and Punk IE has already been doing some of that sort of work too. We need to update our mapping and continue our collaborations. We've been working with Logan and Punk IE always. Within Queen's, the Centre for Data Digitization and Analysis is the unit which has been helping us consider what we might do with the database. And Francis has also been working with the Heritage Hub, which is also something which is Queen's based. And so we have been doing various things of that kind. So if you move on now, Francis.
Yeah, so kind of taking a step back then to the previous phase, we also alluded to what we're doing at the moment. But when I came onto the project in 2017, it was very much to engage with townland names, and previous to my joining the project in 2017, there had been a bit of a hiatus in a few years where the project had no funding, but it very much wasn't the case that townlands hadn't been covered. The townlands had been addressed in County Down and some of the other publications in the place names of Northern Ireland that Greg and Pat and Kay and me all had been involved in previously. So I was brought in 2017 then to really address the remaining townlands that hadn't been addressed in the previous publications. So what I was tasked with doing was to provide a suggested origin and explanatory paragraph for every townland name in Northern Ireland, and have that provided on our website. As Kay had alluded to, the production and the sale of books is very expensive. And when I was brought on in 2017, the decision had been made to shift these suggested origins and analysis onto our website. So it was originally planned to be a 3-year phase of covering the remainder of the townlands, but obviously COVID hit. We were lucky enough to get some extended funding because our work slowed down quite a bit at the beginning of the pandemic. So we finally reached the milestone of having an origin and explanatory paragraph for every townland name just by the end of the year there in 2020, not 2021. So just in Christmas past there, we were able to announce that we had a provisional analysis for every townland name in Northern Ireland. Some of the data that we've looked at more recently hasn't been updated on the website because Michal said we're overhauling the database, and the website rehaul comes alongside that. So the website's frozen. I suppose that's a disclaimer from us at the minute. We're aware of things that need updated and revised, but we can't make any changes just in the next couple of months, but we're making note of everything. So like I said, my role was to provide a suggested origin and explanatory paragraph for every townland name. But I think, as nearly every speaker has mentioned tonight, the figuring out the origins of names can be complicated at times, and also what Pat said, we're coming across new evidence as we go along that makes us want to go back and reconsider names. So not only is it always an ongoing research process, some of the suggestions are very tentative and are only suggested origins. They're not concrete just yet. So I suppose before I go back to the outstanding names, I wanted to mention some of the research that's in progress. So while I'm the only full-time researcher employed on the project, Michal obviously being the professor of Irish, he's very involved in teaching and supervision of research students. But we do have 2 doctoral students who are carrying out their PhDs on place names, and we have Brian, who just recently submitted his PhD thesis on names in Mid Ulster. We have Annie, who's in her first year, and she's looking at place names in South Leinster and using that to draw on information for an obsolete dialect of Irish. So we're very much a team where we hub, and we were until we were scattered with the pandemic and we had to lock up our office for a while, but we're slowly getting back to that. So I mentioned that we are readdressing some of the names that we've looked at in the townland phase that need looking at again. And connected to that, we're also engaging with public bodies, so councils and other individuals who want to get advice on linguistic forms, particularly with a growing demand for commentary on place names for bilingual signage with different decisions that have been made in local councils. So we'll be engaging with councils and other individuals on providing Irish language forms, so which is a bit of a shift in what we've been doing in the previous phase, but also it's allowing us the opportunity to re-engage with names that we've maybe parked because of time and funding constraints, but look at them in more detail whenever we have to provide a form with evidence behind it. So I'm kind of going to finish there. We welcome inquiries from the public, so we have our townlands at qub.ac website. We disseminate stuff through our Twitter. I'm sure plenty of people tonight have found out about the society and the talk tonight from Twitter. And these are the different websites and social media handles where you can get us. I want to thank everybody for coming along tonight before we have a couple of minutes for discussion, and thank our speakers particularly for giving up their time and getting us all up to date as to the place name work that's going on the island and beyond. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I think there may be some questions in the chat. That might be the best place to start. I'll maybe just do them in order. Let's see. If anybody has any questions, I'm not sure if that's a hand in the air.
Yeah, could we maybe open it up, Francis? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to unmute yourself, anybody, or raise a hand, we can welcome questions. There's one here in the chat for Kay, I think. Isn't Adair an O name? Kay, if you want to unmute yourself, you could maybe address that one. Sorry, Kay, I think you're still muted.
I think it can be. I think the trouble there, I mean, the rule has been that if it's an English language surname in a place name, that you haven't translated it unless you were sure that the person bearing it was of that origin. It is difficult to know. So I think it can be, sure enough, but I don't think it necessarily always is. Mind you, I should say, as we always have to say for place names, the field is so vast that one can't remember everything perfectly all the time. So, but I do think that it can be from a place name as well as an English name from a place name as well as an Irish language name.
Thanks, Kay. I have a question here for Pat. Hillhead Road, Coher and Chalmwally. Kevin wants to know, is there still a local name or pronunciation that reflects the original townland name?
Hillhead Road.
Mm-hmm.
Shanwallach. No, I haven't heard Shanwallach. I haven't heard any local pronunciation of that, you know, like anglicized version of the original area. Shanwallach also refers to it's also used for the village of Castle Dawson as well. It's very close by, but I've never heard a sort of an anglicized version of Shanwallach. Just Hillhead. That's the only one I've heard.
Okay, Greg, we have another one for you, Kay. How do you account for O'Brallaghan giving Brillahan beside Brillahan?
It must be simply what one calls an attenuated form, and they do seem to have. This seems to happen quite often, that you get you know, Cashin and Cushion. Many names exist in two forms where you get the middle consonant palatalized, and then that affects the vowel too. I suppose I should then in that case be spelling it O-B-R-O-I-L E-A-C-H A-Fada-I-N, which we may well have done in the book because you only got a sample from it there.
Thanks, Kay. I have another question for everybody. I don't know who's going to take this one up. From Trevor, and he's asking, do we currently have a single definitive source of all place names north and or south, given the variety of sites highlighted tonight? Who wants to take that one? Can I maybe say something in response, Francis? Is that all right? Yeah. I know Pádraig is going to come in on this. So I suppose we don't have a single definitive source. I mean, the
purpose of the Northern Ireland Placement Project and is very similar, but not entirely the same. In that, the purpose of our work is very much work to be conducted in a divided society and in the context of a community where you cannot assume any knowledge of the Irish language. Whereas in the case of Flanagan and Punkayi, you're obviously dealing with a different situation where the majority of people themselves have the Irish language, and perhaps, Pádraig, dare I say, there isn't the same need to explain absolutely everything in terms of the meaning of names, perhaps. But in terms of a definitive source, what I can say, Pádraig, I know I'm going to let you in here, is what I can say is Flanagan and Punkayi draws on the work of Pádraig's branch, which is the placements branch. And it has an All-Ireland architecture, it's fair to say, isn't it, Pádraig? I mean, you were established before us, and therefore with the old Ordnance Survey of Ireland, because you started out in the Ordnance Survey, isn't that right, as an office? So you have an architecture for the whole of the island, which means that there's an entry for every place name, every town name of the island, as far as I understand it, Pádraig, in Flanagan and Punkayi. And what we tried to do in terms of one of our collaborations is that we have a hyperlink between our website and yours for any names that appear on both. So at least we do have that. I mean, we have channels by which people can link the data. Let's put it like that. But there's more to do because the hyperlinks are not in both directions, Pádraig. Currently, the hyperlink is only one direction from us to you, but we really could do with a hyperlink in the other direction from you back to us. Is there anything you'd like to say about that, Pádraig? I mean, I don't want to do all the talking.
Yeah. Well, our website includes all of the, presumably all of the traditional administrative names in the country that should be there at any rate, townlands, parishes and baronies. And also I'd say a fair proportion, I can't give you the exact figures of the names and the Ordnance Survey maps. That would be sort of the core of our collection. The number of Irish language forms that we have included for Northern Ireland, though, would be considerably lower than, I suppose, the majority of the counties south of the border, as it were. So I hope this is something that we can develop more as there can be more collaboration on that front, and that we can include more of the Irish language forms for Northern Ireland, based largely at any rate on the research you're conducting.
Thank you, Pádraig.
I'm going to keep firing the questions, if that's all right. I have a question from Roddy Hegarty, who has, I suppose, two questions. He's looking for advice for recording minor field names which are not recorded in administrative records, and encouraging people to make practical use of their townland names beyond road signs and boundary markers. But who wants to take that one?
Okay. Can we maybe start, Francis, by mentioning Mehel again, which Pádraig has talked about? Mm-hmm. Happy, Pádraig, are you not, to have place names from all over Ireland, not just down south? And I'm sure you do have input, don't you, from people in the north and from northern counties?
Yes, we do, yes, yeah. And we would be delighted actually to welcome, further input from any place, minor names from any part of Ireland. I mean, the important thing is these names are disappearing, non-administrative names, and it's really, as I showed that example of the old man, the elderly man from West Clare, he noted that even in his youth that there were many more names, as it happens in Irish in West Clare, and that most of them are no longer used. So it's really is important that these minor names are collected, and I mean, we'd be more than welcome, of course, if people would share their names in the Mehel source. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pat, you've done some work too, haven't you, on minor names?
Yeah, I collected about 50 from Irish Lang around about my own area, on the north shore of the Loch Ness. But I'm aware of quite a number of different local collections. There's one around the Cregan area of County Tyrone, And I also know the Lough Neagh Partnership have been trying their best to set up project, encouraging people to collect the local field names. So I do believe that there's quite a lot of work has been done, but it's sometimes the question of coordinating it, and you wonder where it ends up sometimes. What we really need is something like Mehel, where it all ends up, everything is sort of pulled together, and it's very, very useful then to be able to compare them. A couple of years ago, Kay and Gordon McCoy and myself were involved in a project at Causeway Coast and Glens, and there was a collection of a published collection of place names from around about Tor Head, and a lovely book, beautiful book, which not only had the minor names but assigned them all, discussed the townland names as well, and then within the townland then all the minor place names. So that was a very, very worthwhile venture. So I think there's plenty going on that way. It's maybe just a question maybe of trying to get it all coordinated a bit better. That's what I would have thought.
I would just agree with Pat on that, because I would address the engagement with the public, so the emails that come in, and we get so many people saying, I've been gathering townland names or field names in my area for so many years, or I've brought a group together and we do this as a hobby thing, because people have a real ownership over their minor names and their local names, and there's a real emotional connection there. So I think, as Pat said, it's getting a mechanism where that's fed into the likes of Mehel.ie and letting people know that facility is there, because there may come a time, 5 or 10 years time, when people working on the place name project are addressing minor names, and to have a record already there of names that might otherwise have been lost, I think is going to be really valuable. And I think that's where the value for us in engagement with the public is, not only in dissemination but in gathering data from the field that these people know better than anybody else sitting in an office in Queens, so that's an important part.
All the names for Cork and Kerry were done by Eamon Langford, all the minor names. So there's a huge collection there on placenames.ie, and he really, put it out. I mean, the amount he collected was phenomenal, so
Fantastic.
there's a very richness of material there to be collected.
Absolutely right, yeah.
Greg has just added into the chat there that we have had some very good dissertations on minor names in recent years, which he hopes to see published in Annam. So that's obviously work that's ongoing even in the department, that needs kind of put out there. And Una Brannock, who's involved with Mehels, she is saying that they can also accept and publish as a collection place names research by an individual or a group. So if someone has a collection of names, they could be published as a set or as a collection and attributed to that person, rather than having to be done individually. I have another question here from Kieran. I think I need you to keep me in check and when to stop at the questions. Have I time for another question?
I think maybe this will be maybe the last 5 minutes. Yes, Francis, was very conscious of people's time. Yes.
Yeah. So Kieran is asking, how do you handle disputes? An example is the River Dee, which is signed and on Loganyam as Anyi, but he's heard it argued as a shortened corruption of Owen Walia Aha Ergia. That might be one for Padraig.
Well, as far as I know, the river name Onni and Onni, that it's well documented in Irish. I think it might be even in the Táin Bócúilne, and so I think it's quite different to Baile area, the town of the ford of Ferdia. So I think both names are quite distinct and well documented in Irish.
Francis, may I speak?
Yes, absolutely.
I think Paul Gosling has done very detailed work on the fords that are mentioned in TBC. And I believe his theory that we have wrongly identified the Nith with the river that comes through Ardee. It is actually the river with that name must have been further north because of the way the fords go, but it's quite a detailed argument. But I think in this case, it's one of these embarrassing situations like Gualahu and Gaula, that actually some evidence has come to light that shows that previous scholarship was mistaken.
Good, Kay. That's an example. I'm conscious, Francis, that we're out of time. I wanted to bring Kay in on something, actually, if that's okay. And that was that Roddy had also asked about encouraging people to use their townland names and not just having them confined to signage. I think was Roddy's point, that, you know, that he did a survey, did he not say, in the Lough Neagh area, where although people for identity, only 30% use their townland name in correspondence. So I'm not sure what your view of that is. And I know that you were very involved in the townland campaign here when there was the furore at first about the move to road names and the dangers that might bring for the preservation of townland names. So would you like to say something about that?
Well, I think, I mean, to answer both questions, I think it is very important that townland names do appear in written form somewhere, because I think there's that country shyness often about using a name that people have not seen written with people who may not know it. You know, there's a tendency to say that you come from the local town or the bigger townland or the better known townland to people who wouldn't know the one that you really do come from. And so I think that any signage that shows the townland names will give people the idea, yes, this is a real place. Because I have been told, I think, do you remember Shauna McCrory, Pat? We had a very nice student from the Clogher area, and she said, oh, wonderful, these are townlands. I thought they were just names that the old people used. And I live in hope, you see, if they're there, then they're real, because we're also literate now. We expect things to have a written form, even though I think a lot of us here would agree that the form in which they are now written is not the one that they originally should have had.
Yeah. Do you mind if I just use my privilege here to bring Creevin in before we break? And that is, Creevin, I was really staggered by the figure you mentioned. I was also by Porix, where he mentioned about 125,000 names in Logan and Pungai. We've about 30,000 in the NI PNP website, as Kay and Pat will know. Creevin, you mentioned 16,000, didn't you, in the first 18 volumes?
Yeah, we're averaging about 2,000 per volume.
Yeah.
Of course, just it came up as a query earlier on. I suppose you're working from a fixed set of names going backwards in the sense of townland names, administrative names, and local names. Whereas we're just throwing whatever comes at us written in the Irish language pre-1800, mostly Irish, some Latin, and we just deal with it. And the amount of, as sources are published, like what we find is that we have a huge amount of additions and corrections to the volumes that have already been printed, which are going to have to be included. And like ultimately our biggest next step is going to have to be moving properly into the database sphere. And, you know, we've it set up for it, but we haven't actually, we did a trial run, but we need to really get into that area. But we're not worried about it until we get to the end of it. But at the same time, we want to be in a situation where we can make this available. It should be integrated with all the other materials. You should be able to click from one thing to another. I think ultimately that would be the idea to work, because we'd have historical. We have loads of names where we can't identify the places. You know, the kind of reverse problem that you have, like, you know, where you have you can't get sources for them, like, you know. Or,
absolutely, yeah. And the linking to that is really important. Yeah.
So you replied. Michal, yes, could I just say something that I meant to say?
Of course.
During my talk, and that is that, you know, I was asked to do 2,000 road names. It's a tall order, but I should have said that I wasn't starting from scratch, because the Ulster Place Name Society already have a website, ulsterplacenames.org. Street and road names were a lot. There were a lot of. I was able to draw on that. I was also able to draw on Dr. Kane. I'm doing this by way of apology to Dr. Kane. You've done fantastic work on Dungannon, the old Dungannon, and so that was a big help. Also, Brian O'Devlin's thesis on the barony of Lough Inchylin. I was in regular contact with Brian. I forgot to acknowledge these when I was speaking. I have finished the 2,000 names at long last, And
Oh,
I
don't
thought
you
the next
think?
the next step is to do the townlands. Of course, you'll have noticed that a lot of the townlands have been done while I was doing the road part of the research. A lot of the roads are named from townlands, so a lot of them are done, but there's still quite a few to do. So that's my next task for Mid Ulster Council. Okay, I'll better get to say that.
That's great, Pat. Thank you very much.
Can I say something again? Doonla and Leisha are here.
Yes, and thank you very much, Donal and Leisha, for being here. I think Leisha may now have left us, but these are Deirdre Flanagan's daughters. So they always join us for this lecture, and absolutely, it was great. It was great to have them. So, Francis, can we bring things to a close and let all our patient audience leave us for the evening? Can I sum up, and then can you also add anything if I forget? Francis, is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to thank everybody. For my part, I just wanted to thank everybody. And I want to do this especially because I want to thank you. You can't thank yourself. So therefore, I've stepped in here, if that's okay, Francis. So I wanted to thank Francis for all the work she's done in preparing for this. She brought all the slides together, communicated with everybody on the panel, facilitated them in every way possible, and always is very competent technically as well. So really, really grateful to you, Francis, for that. And I'm really, really grateful as current chair of the society for the panel coming together and being so generous with your time, really generous with your time. We're really grateful to Pádraig, to Caoimhín, to Pat, and to Kay for joining us, Francis. And thank you very much. This was a great idea, and I think it worked really well. I think people got lots of information, and there's clearly an awful lot going on in Placement Study. And the pandemic may have limited us in certain ways, but it certainly didn't quench our ardor. Let's put it like that. So full steam ahead. Thank you very much, everybody, for being with us, and a very good evening.
Is it going to go?
Thanks, everybody.
Simon's there as well.
Yes, oh, Simon's been there, and Isla and Carol. Yeah, real Carol.
Yeah.
It's real Simon, real Diana.
We're all asked to switch off the videos, weren't we, the cameras?
Yeah.
Yes. But it's been great. Well done, everyone. Absolutely super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Carol.
Oh, and
Nice to see
Liam's
you.
there too. Yes, I hope I didn't say anything wrong.
It's terrific. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, Carol, thanks for joining us, and thanks to everybody else in Scotland. David Brune and others, thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Right.
That's all that's left.